All right, we'll talk about these three classes now: Scyphozoa, Cubozoa, and Anthozoa. Scyphozoa are what are called true jellies because when we think of a jelly, this is what we typically think of. The really dominant bell shape with the tentacles and the kind of these oral arms sticking down there. Several notable species here. This is the Cyanea, or the lion's mane jellyfish, can be up to 2 meters in diameter and have 70-meter long tentacles. It's pretty big. They swim through kind of a rhythmic pulsing of their bell. So they kind of fill their bell with water and then push out the water in order to kind of propel themselves. They have a sensory organ around the umbrella called a Rhopalium. You can see the different Rhopalium there, and these things are filled with statocysts and ocelli. They have a nerve net throughout, and they kind of have one underneath the umbrella and one kind of above the umbrella. The one under controls movement. The other one kind of controls some of the other actions that are going on. The Manubrium, which is the area surrounding the mouth, extends to form these oral arms, which these oral arms are used for capturing prey after they've been stung. The gastrovascular cavity forms what are called like gastric pouches. So you can see that here, radial canals, another name for that. You can kind of they just radiate out from the center. This again acts to kind of circulate the materials throughout the jelly. Um, the inside of each of these canals are also lined with nematocysts to kind of finish off the prey. A couple of notable species here. The Aurelia, or moon jellies, are notable just for their appearance. They're featured in several popular things. And so you can kind of see here they have a different look to them. Their tentacles are not very big. They actually don't use their tentacles to capture prey. They capture prey on their surface and kind of move the prey toward the stomach using cilia. There's a picture of their tentacles up close. I don't have a picture of the strobulation. Strobulation is how they repeat, or how they reproduce from the polyp stage, but their most prominent stage is going to be the Medusa stage. Cubozoa are cube jellies, and in cube jellies, the Medusa is also the dominant stage, and in some species, the polyp stage is actually unknown. Cubozoa get their name from their square-shaped bell, as you can see here, almost perfectly square. Most are very small, but these are among the most deadly organisms in the world, much less jellies. The box jelly is notable in that group as well. You have the tentacles coming out of the corners of that square, very predictable kind of pattern. Not as many tentacles typically as the Scyphozoa. They have these Rhopalium too. And one interesting thing about the Rhopalium on Cubozoa is they have 6 eyes in each, and one of those eyes can have a lens in it, which is a little more developed than we've seen. And only 4 species. There's about 150 or so species of maybe that's another one that I'm thinking about. I think that's Ctenophores. So there's not very many species of Cubozoa, and the life cycle of them is only known. Complete life cycle is only known in 4 species. So largely unknown class of jellies. And then the last class are called Anthozoa, literally means flower animals. These animals are these jellies that have no Medusa stage. They're all marine. Many forms are supported by a hard skeleton at their base. We'll get into that. One of the more popular animals in this group are called sea anemones. There's a picture there. Here's some more sea anemones. They kind of look like flowers, which is where they get their name, Anthozoa. They have this cylindrical kind of form, and around the crown are the tentacles. You can see the mouth there. The mouth leads to an area called the pharynx, and the pharynx allows for some current control from separation from the nutrients and the waste as they're going in and out. Also maintains the hydrostatic skeleton, which keeps them upright. And they'll feed on just about anything they can fit in their mouth. They're kind of able to glide on the pedal disc, very similar to the hydrozoa. They have mutualistic relationships with several kinds of organisms. Clownfish and the sea anemone is one of the most common that you've probably heard of, where the fish live inside the anemone's tentacles and have a safe place to live because nothing else goes in there. And the clownfish poops all over the place and feeds the sea anemone, and you get the idea. And then here's this hermit crab that has a sea anemone attached to it. So that's another mutualistic kind of relationship, or maybe even just a commensal relationship. Hexacorallian corals are an example of an anthozoa also, and these are what form coral reefs. These are called true corals. The reason they're called hexacorallian is because they have a 6-part symmetry. The difference between these and sea anemones is they form a calcareous cup underneath them, which is basically made from calcium carbonate, um, and they produce this kind of skeletal cup that they live in, almost like a exoskeleton. And so when they die, they leave this cup behind, and a new organism comes in and builds its own cup, and you can eventually, over thousands of years, create these large structures called reefs. And so what you see here is a living reef, because you can tell because the outer surface of it is fuzzy. It's a way to think about it because it has these living things on it, whereas a dead reef won't have this kind of look to it. Octocorallian corals are similar sort of thing. They just have 8-part symmetry. They're always colonial. This particular group is, meaning they all kind of work together. They have a common gastrovascular cavity, which is one thing that makes them interesting. So a little bit more about coral reefs. Coral reefs are the most productive of ecosystems outside of rainforests. They're deposited by corals over thousands of years as they live and die. And there's a couple of species that do this more than others. And they have a kind of mutualistic relationship with algae. And so the algae produces sugar for the environment, which, it's kind of like this typical kind of ecosystem where you have producers at the bottom. So those algae kind of form that spot, and then animals come in and by the lots, as you can see here. And usually limited to shallower waters between north and south 30 latitude, so warmer, shallower waters, and they require lots of light because of the algae, of course. There are a couple kinds of barrier reefs. You have the fringing reefs, which are are closer to land and shallower. You have the barrier reef, which extends out further away from land and has this kind of barrier. It forms a barrier between the land and the sea within, which is typically called a lagoon. And then you have the atoll, which forms a lagoon from within, and the land is gone, and you have this. It's just all coral. So there's some pictures of these fringing reef here, really close to the shore, as you can see. Barrier reef. Barrier reef. Here you have the land, and here you have this long barrier out to the side, where you have this lagoon in the middle, and an atoll is just coral is present, and you have the lagoon in the middle.